So we've got a major shift in the Benson case, and this one is one of the biggest developments that we've seen so far. The full court has officially stepped in and agreed to rehear the case en banc. That means that the full court is now taking control of the case, and even more importantly, the prior decision striking down the DC magazine ban has now been vacated. But now we have another significant development that is layered on top of all of this. The parties asked the court here to slow this case down temporarily and wait for the Supreme Court to issue their rulings in two different two-way cases that are currently pending in front of them. And that was just granted by the court. So let's break down what this means and what happens now going forward. Now, before we jump into this video, if you want to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is simply by subscribing. You can also hit the like button that just tells the algorithm that you appreciate this content, and so it shares it with more people. I also want to thank the sponsor of this video, which is Patriot Gold Group. If you've been watching the markets closely, you will know that something unusual is happening. Silver has surged to over 158% in 2025, and this move isn't over yet. It looks like the opening chapter is just happening right now. This is not the finale at all. Gold is up 60%, silver is up 150%, and that kind of move doesn't just happen by accident. Now, as a member of the Second Amendment community, this concept already makes sense to you. You believe in self-reliance, in not outsourcing your safety, and in being prepared before you're forced to actually react. Your finances deserve the same type of mindset that your self-defense also gets. That's why I work with Patriot Gold Group. They help Americans protect their savings with physical gold and silver, and these metals you can have delivered to you or held in a no-fee-for-life IRA. They specialize in rolling over IRAs and 401ks into real, tangible assets that you actually own. Now, this isn't about market panic or anything like that. It's about positioning yourself and putting yourself in the best position to defend your finances like you would defend your life. So if you're interested, check out Patriot Gold Group. You can mention Armed Scholar when you check out to get the best-in-class service from the Patriots that are focused on protecting your investments, or you can call 888-581-3830, and you can get also a free investment guide and see if you qualify for a no-fee-for-life IRA on qualifying rollovers. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, we have another important update in the Benson magazine ban case that is coming out of DC. So first, quickly, let's recap what happened in Benson because it's critical to understand where things currently stand and where this case is going. Now, the DC Court of Appeals originally ruled that the district's ban on magazines that hold more than 10 rounds does in fact violate the Second Amendment. Not only did the court strike down the ban itself, it also vacated multiple related convictions tied to this individual and this ban. This included things like the possession of the unregistered firearm that Tyree Benson had, the unlawful possession of ammunition, and carrying without a license. So the court said that those convictions were infected by the unconstitutional magazine ban there in DC. Now, that was a sweeping ruling with major consequences, and ever since then, DC has been trying to contain that ruling. After losing, DC filed a petition for a rehearing en banc and tried to fast-track review and limit the impact of the ruling. That expedited review was initially denied, but then the United States, the DOJ, the Trump administration stepped in and actually argued that the court here went too far in its remedy and that the full court review was needed when it came to the remedy issue. And eventually, that effort succeeded, and the court here granted the en banc rehearing. The DC Court of Appeals officially granted a rehearing en banc, and once that happened, the original March 5th opinion was then vacated. That means that the ruling striking down the DC ban on magazines that hold more than 10 rounds is now essentially no longer binding. It's been blocked for now. It has no binding precedential effect as of right now, and the entire case is now being reconsidered by the full court. So the strong pro two-way ruling that we got and that we've discussed previously is effectively paused, at least for now. But now something else has developed in this case. The court has now officially granted the request to delay the en banc briefing and the rehearing of this case, and that's going to be scheduled and pushed out until July 20th. The reason for that delay is tied directly to two pending Supreme Court two-way cases, which are the Woolford versus Lopez case and the U.S. versus Hamani case. Both of those cases deal with how courts are supposed to apply the Second Amendment framework under that Bruen decision. In Woolford, the Supreme Court is looking at whether states can prohibit carrying firearms on a private property open to the public unless the owner affirmatively gives consent. And in the Hamani case, the Supreme Court is looking at whether the federal prohibition on firearms possession by unlawful drug users is constitutional or not. Now, while those cases involve different factual issues, they both go directly to how courts analyze Second Amendment claims under Bruen, and that matters a lot for what will happen in Benson. What this order really tells us is that the DC Court of Appeals does not want to move forward with the en banc briefing and rehearing until the Supreme Court potentially clarifies the laws. That is significant because it means that the full court recognizes that the Supreme Court may soon actually reshape Second Amendment analysis in jurisprudence once again, and rather than forcing the parties to brief the case right here and now and then potentially have to redo everything later, the court here is choosing to wait until the Supreme Court issues those rulings. And honestly, this delay may actually make sense strategically for this case. If briefing moved forward immediately right now, both sides would likely have to supplement or rewrite some major portions of their arguments after the Supreme Court issues those rulings. And this stay granted by the DC Court of Appeals actually avoids that problem, but more importantly, it ties the future of Benson directly to what now develops at the Supreme Court level. So where does this currently leave us with this DC magazine ban, the restriction on magazines that hold more than 10 rounds? Well, the full DC Court of Appeals will now still rehear this case en banc. The court will still reconsider whether magazine bans are constitutional and whether the prior remedy was proper or not. But now all of that analysis may happen under fresh Supreme Court guidance after the Supreme Court issues those rulings, which should come at the end of this term, either late June, early July, in both of those cases, Woolford and Homani. So the Benson case just took another major turn. Not only was the original ruling actually wiped out, at least for now, but now the full court has officially slowed the case down to wait for the Supreme Court to issue guidance in those rulings. And that means that the future of this magazine ban challenge may ultimately actually depend on what the Supreme Court does in those two other cases and what they say in the next couple months. So that's where the Benson magazine ban case currently stands. As soon as we get the Supreme Court rulings in those cases, or if we get any other developments in the Benson case, I will bring that straight to you guys. If you like this video and you'd like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is simply by liking, commenting, and subscribing. All of those things help to fuel the algorithm and just tells the algorithm that you appreciate this type of two-way content, and so it shares it with more people. But as always, thank you so much for all of your support, and never forget this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.